This is video number 6 for a property in Treannadullagh for Chris Bailey. So we figured in the last video that there is some deterioration of some of the stones in the wall, and I reckon the deterioration is because the stones are basically some of the stones are slate stones. So the black ones you can see are slate stones. And I think the deterioration is being exacerbated because of the increased moisture content in the wall. So it would be sensible for us to try and reduce the amount of moisture in the wall. And we start to ask ourselves, okay, well, what do we do? And as again, I spoke before about the ways to reduce the moisture in the wall. There are 3 ways. One is to ensure that you have a step from inside to outside, that this ground is 6 inches lower. The other way is to put in a land drain, a French drain, to reduce the groundwater table. And then the other way, the third way, is by removing the cement render and possibly replacing it with a lime render. So we need to think about whether we're going to do that or not. Now, in this particular instance, I don't think I would. Now, I would take the 2 steps of reducing the external level and putting in the French drain. I would do both of those, and I would hope that that would be enough. And the reason I'm saying that we wouldn't remove the cement render is because, it's going to be difficult to remove that cement render. It's going to be a hell of a job to try and take it off. And, you have to take it off and then replace it with a cement render. So my attitude would be, well, can we get away without taking it off? So what I would be looking at is, okay, now that the cement render is on, okay, that does prevent rising moisture from evaporating. But if we're putting in the French drain, hopefully that will alleviate some of that problem. But the other thing is the cement render will actually, if it's in good condition and cracks have been filled and repaired, it will stop moisture coming into the wall. Okay. However, if we're going to keep the cement render, and I suppose the reason I'm trying to keep the cement render is I'm trying to reduce the amount of work that would be necessary, because I think it'll be difficult to take it off. And my attitude is we'll do a kind of a minimalist approach. Let's not take it off unless it's absolutely necessary. Let's try and put in the French drain and just reduce the level and see if that works. Now, if we are going to retain the cement render, it's very important to maintain it in good condition, because it's an impermeable barrier. Let's say if there's a crack in this render, or if there are cracks in this render, rainwater will come in through the cracks, but then they can't get out because the barrier prevents evaporation. So if we're going to keep it, you have to maintain it. Any cracks that are in it have to be filled, and it has to be painted regularly and maintained in good condition, a good barrier, if it's going to be kept. Now, at the minute, the cement render is in good condition all around the building. The only thing is the building does need to be painted because the paint has deteriorated. There are some cracks that need to be filled, but it's mostly just painting that's required. And there's not really significant cracks in the render. So that would be my recommendation in general. We will hopefully reduce the amount of water in the wall by putting in the French drain, by improving some of the details to make sure that there's no rainwater accessing from the roof, that there's no rain penetrating from the any cracks that might be in the cement render. And hopefully that will be enough to keep the wall and maintain it in reasonable condition. So what about these slates that I discussed earlier in terms of, do we need to remove these stones? Have they deteriorated enough for us to justify removing, for it to be necessary to remove them? I would have said in general, no. I mean, they are softer, but they're generally strong enough to be retained. Apart from this one here is very soft. So you may decide to locally remove that stone and replace it with a different stone because it's very soft. But in general, this wall is fairly plumb. It's only out of plumb by 65 millimeters, and it may have even been built in that in condition. So I would have said we can retain it, and we would just after we've done the French drain and after we've done reduced the levels externally, I would be just doing local repairs here with a lime mortar. And I'll discuss the lime mortar later on, but basically we would be doing a lime mortar repair by locally, I suppose, where the cement render has come off. I would be raking out the pointing, up to about 2 inches depth, raking out the pointing, replacing it with a lime mortar, and then rendering over these patches with a lime plaster. And that lime plaster that I'm talking about using is a 3.5 NHL, natural hydraulic lime. And the mix is 1 part of natural hydraulic lime and 2.5 parts sharp sand. Now I have that written down in another part of the report. So basically what I'm talking about doing here are just patch repairs. And I think that should be enough. Because this grouting here, it is very soft. Some in areas it's very soft. So in areas where it's exposed, I would rake it out and replace it up to a depth of about 50 millimeters. But I think the wall is still stable. The wall is still plumb. The external render hasn't cracked. There doesn't appear to be too much movement. So local repairs, I think, would be sufficient. Remember, although this may seem very, very soft, lime mortars are often very soft. We're often very, very soft historically. They do build walls, cob walls out of clay that are soft, and they can be retained. So you can't just, it's not necessary just to tear it down just because the mortar appears very soft. It's not always necessary. So I'm going to go back here and continue on to okay, so again, I spoke about the external. The external cement render appears to be in good condition, but the only thing is it requires painting. And the way I would be doing that is, it does seem to be a mixture of paint, and there's areas where it looks like it's actually been lime washed because there's such a concentration of what looks to be lime. So it seems to be a mixture of paint and lime. Now, the lime is not going to help the wall to breathe at all because it all seems to be a cement render everywhere. So the wall is not really going to breathe. So because we're talking about retaining the cement render, what I would suggest is you just paint it. You don't need to lime wash it because it can't breathe anyway because of the cement render. So you could just paint it. So what I would remove the existing paint or lime wash, whatever's on it, with a power wash or mechanical means where necessary. And then so that the paint adheres, what you generally do is you wash the wall down with a biocide. Treat it with a biocide. You basically just spray it with a biocide, which kills any fungal growth. And after a few weeks, then you'll be able to paint it after all the fungal growth has gone. If there is any fungal growth, it might not even be that visible, but you should always treat it with a biocide before painting to ensure that the paint adheres. And any cracks should be filled and maintained so that no penetrating damp can get in. Now, this is another patch here. That's the west gable wall. There's another damp patch here. I think that damp patch there is probably just dampness because of the adjacent flat roof. So that problem should resolve itself if you replace the flat roof with an A roof, as I mentioned earlier. Now this area is directly over that area again, over the slate stones. This is the west gable wall. Some of these stones up here are loose or are not really, they're not really held in very well. I'm not sure what happened here, but any stones that are loose, what I would be talking about doing, like it's at the top of the wall, I would remove them and relay them using the same natural hydraulic lime mix, just to make sure that they're they're stable, they're not going to fall out. So that locally, that area could be rebuilt, those loose stones if they're there. And again, that'll probably be done, when the roof is replaced. And again, you have a similar situation here. This is the same gable wall, the west gable wall, but just the other side. Some of the stones up here are loose. That when the roof is done, you might decide to just take them stones down and rebuild them using the lime mortar. There's a significant crack here in the cement render. So I removed some of this render here just to see how much of it would come off with a crowbar. And, it's not coming off too easily. So this is why I say to myself, well, trying to take off the cement render would be extremely difficult, or maybe extremely difficult, and you're not supposed to take it off with mechanical means because you might damage the stone. And if you start taking it off by hand, it might break your heart. So you would have to ask yourself, is it really necessary? All I would really be doing with this one is another patch repair, where I would be taking off any loose render, loose plaster that does come off. And again, I would do a local repair with the natural hydraulic lime mortar. And that's the repairs to the west gable wall. That's all I would do. This photograph, I've included this photograph here because it does show, this is the ceiling level here. The ceiling board is missing now. This is the west gable wall again. Internally, you have a cement render down here, and it does look like they actually left the lime render and the lime wash up on the upper portion of the gable there. A lot of the gables are like that on the inside, where it's the lime. So just so that you notice the difference there, the two different materials. Now what I'm going to do is, this is the west gable wall here, and this is I'm going to stop this video here actually because it's getting a bit too long, and I'll continue on in video 7.